ab nach links, geht aber aus dem Kornschieber raus. Das muss man
7 bullets. 7. That isn't an accident. That is an execution. But here is the thing about destiny. Sometimes it misses the target. When Clara Evans threw her body in front of Isabella Rossi, the most feared matriarch in New York, she didn't just save a life. She started a war. She was a nobody, a waitress. And he was Dominic Rossi, the king of the city. He didn't love her. He didn't even know her name. But as she bled out on the emergency room table, he did the unthinkable. He put a ring on her finger. Why? Because in the Mafia, you don't kill a boss's wife. But Clara has a secret, one that might be more dangerous than the bullets lodged in her chest. This is the story of the waitress who took the fall, and the monster who married her to keep her alive. The champagne at the Pierre Hotel didn't taste like celebration. It tasted like old money and silent threats. That was the first thing Clara Evans noticed as she balanced a tray of crystal flutes, weaving through the crowd of men in tuxedos that cost more than her entire life's earnings. She wasn't supposed to be working the Rossi Winter Gala. She was a substitute, covering a shift for a girl named Jenny, who had called in sick with the flu. Clara needed the money. Her rent in Queens was overdue, and her mother's medical bills back in Ohio were piling up. She didn't know who the Rossis were. To her, they were just rich people with heavy security. "Steady, sweetheart," a deep voice rumbled. Clara froze, nearly tipping the tray. She looked up into eyes the color of burnt espresso. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and radiated a terrifying kind of coldness. He wasn't handsome in the way models were. He was handsome in the way a predator is beautiful. Sharp. Dangerous. "Sorry, sir," Clara murmured, stepping back. "Dominic, let the girl work," an older woman's voice cut in. "Isabella Rossi, the matriarch." She was small, dressed in vintage Chanel, with silver hair pulled back into a severe bun. But her eyes were kind. She reached out and steadied Clara's tray with a hand covered in diamonds. "You look exhausted, Clara. Take a breath." "Thank you, ma'am," Clara said, feeling a strange warmth from the woman. It's a lot of people." "It's a shark tank," Dominic muttered, adjusting his cufflinks. "Mother, we should move to the private lounge. The Costa family representatives just arrived. I don't like the way Victor is looking at you." "Victor Costa is a peacock," Isabella scoffed, taking a glass of champagne from Clara's tray. "He preens. He does not bite." That was when the air changed. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a feeling. The hairs on Clara's arms stood up. She saw movement in her peripheral vision, near the service entrance. A waiter. But he wasn't holding a tray. He was reaching into his jacket. His eyes weren't on the crowd. They were locked on Isabella Rossi. Clara didn't think. She didn't calculate the risk. She didn't know that interfering in a Mafia hit was a death sentence. She just saw a gun barrel glinting under the chandelier light, pointed directly at the kind old woman who had helped her steady her tray. "Get down!" Clara screamed. The music stopped. The first shot cracked like a whip. Clara threw herself forward, shoving Isabella Rossi to the marble floor. Bang, bang, bang. It felt like being punched by a sledgehammer, again and again. The tray of champagne shattered, glass raining down like diamonds. Clara's body jerked with every impact. She was a shield of flesh and bone over the Rossi matriarch. 7 times. The gun flashed 7 times before Dominic Rossi's own weapon roared, putting a bullet directly between the assassin's eyes. Silence rushed back into the room, heavier than before. "Mother!" Dominic dropped to his knees, sliding across the blood-slicked floor. Isabella was shaking, covered in red, but she was unharmed. She was staring up at the girl lying on top of her. "Dominic! Dominic! Help her!" Dominic pulled Clara off his mother. The waitress was limp, her cheap black uniform soaked through. Her breath was coming in wet, ragged gasps. Pink froth bubbled at her lips. She looked up, her eyes unfocused, landing on Dominic. Clara coughed, blood spilling down her chin. Is she okay? Dominic Rossi, a man who hadn't felt fear since he was a boy, felt a shard of ice pierce his chest. He looked at the 7 wounds destroying this girl's torso. She was dying. She was absolutely dying. And she was asking if his mother was okay. She's alive, Dominic said, his voice unrecognizable. You saved her. Good, Clara whispered. Her eyes rolled back. Enzo! Dominic roared, his voice cracking the stunned silence of the ballroom. Get the car, now! If she dies, everyone in this room dies. The waiting room of Lenox Hill Hospital was cleared out. The Rossi family didn't wait in lines, and they didn't fill out insurance forms. They bought the floor. Dominic stood by the window, staring out at the rain slicking the streets of Manhattan. His hands were scrubbed clean, but he could still feel the phantom warmth of Clara's blood. The surgery has been going on for 6 hours, Dom, Enzo said, pacing behind him. Enzo was his consigliere, his right hand. Dr. Sterling says the damage to her liver and left lung is catastrophic. They removed 3 bullets, but the other 4, they're close to the spine and the heart. She stays alive, Dominic said. It wasn't a hope. It was an order. There is another problem, Enzo said, lowering his voice. The shooter. We identified him. He's Costa payroll, obviously. But the Costa family, they know she survived the initial hit. Victor Costa knows a witness is still breathing, and you know the rule. Dominic turned. No witnesses. Exactly. If she wakes up, she can ID the face. Even if she doesn't, Costa will want to finish the job just to send a message. She's a loose end, a civilian. She has no protection. Dominic looked through the glass of the ICU doors. He could see the team of doctors swarming around the small, pale figure hooked up to a ventilator. She was a nobody, a waitress. If she died, the police would investigate for a week and then file it away as gang violence collateral. But she had taken 7 bullets for his mother. Isabella Rossi was sitting in the corner, clutching a rosary. She stood up, her voice trembling. She is not a loose end, Dominic. She is family now. You make her family. Dominic looked at his mother. Then he looked at Enzo. Call Father Thomas, Dominic said. Enzo blinked. For the last rites? Dom, she's not dead yet. No, Dominic straightened his jacket. Not for last rites. For a wedding. Enzo's jaw dropped. Boss, you can't be serious. You don't know her. We haven't even run a background check. If she is my wife, Dominic cut him off, his voice lethal. Then touching her is an act of war against the entire Rossi organization. If she is just a waitress, Costa can send a hitman to smother her in her sleep tonight. If she is Mrs. Dominic Rossi, she is untouchable. She's unconscious, Dom. She can't say I do. I am Dominic Rossi, he said, walking toward the ICU doors. I will say it for both of us. The scene inside the ICU room was surreal. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only music. The smell of antiseptic was the perfume. Dr. Sterling looked terrified as Dominic entered, followed by a trembling priest who had been pulled out of bed at 3 a.m. Mr. Rossi, Dr. Sterling stammered. You can't be in here. She's in critical... Perform the ceremony, Father, Dominic commanded, ignoring the doctor. He moved to the side of the bed. Clara looked small, too small. Her skin was translucent, blue veins visible beneath the surface. Tubes ran down her throat. Her chest rose and fell with the mechanical hiss of the ventilator. Dominic reached down and took her hand. It was cold, limp. There was calloused skin on her fingers. Working hands. Do you? Father Thomas stuttered, sweat beading on his forehead. Dominic Antonio Rossi, take this woman. Clara, Dominic said, reading the name off the hospital bracelet. Clara Evans. Take Clara Evans to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you? Clara Evans. The priest looked helplessly at the unconscious girl. Dominic squeezed her cold hand. She accepts. By the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. Dominic didn't kiss her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his own pinky ring. a heavy gold band with the Rossi crest. It was too big for her finger, so he slid it onto her thumb. It hung there, heavy and absurd, weighing down her fragile hand. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear, whispering to a woman who couldn't hear him. "You live, Clara. You live because I own you now. And nobody breaks what belongs to me." He straightened up and turned to Enzo. "Put guards at the door. 2 inside, 4 outside. If anyone who isn't Dr. Sterling tries to enter, kill them. She is the Don's wife now." Dominic walked out of the room, leaving his new bride to fight death alone. But as he stepped into the hallway, Enzo grabbed his arm. "Dom, the background check just came through." Enzo's face was pale. "And? You need to see this." Enzo handed him a tablet. "Her name is Clara Evans, but Evans is her mother's maiden name, her birth certificate. The father isn't listed, but we ran a DNA match from the blood on her uniform against the criminal database." Dominic looked at the screen. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Impossible," Dominic hissed. "It's a 99% match," Enzo said. "Dom, you just married Victor Costa's illegitimate daughter." Pain was the first thing Clara felt. It wasn't a sharp pain anymore. It was a dull, heavy throb that seemed to weigh down every inch of her body. It felt like she was submerged in deep water, the pressure crushing her chest. She blinked her eyes open. She expected the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital, the smell of bleach, the sound of nurses in the hallway. Instead, she saw gold. A ceiling painted with cherubs and storm clouds. Heavy velvet curtains pulled shut against the day. The sheets covering her were silk, cool and impossibly soft against her scarred skin. "Am I dead?" she wondered. "Is this the afterlife?" She tried to sit up, but a bolt of agony shot through her abdomen, forcing a gasp from her dry throat. "I wouldn't move if I were you," a voice came from the shadows. Clara froze. She knew that voice. It was the voice of the man from the gala, the man with the eyes like burnt espresso. Dominic Rossi stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo now. He was in a black button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and ink. He looked tired, but his gaze was as sharp as a razor. "Where am I?" Clara rasped. Her voice sounded like grinding glass. "My home," Dominic said, walking to the bedside table and pouring a glass of water. He held it out, but didn't help her drink. He watched her struggle to lift her hand, his expression unreadable. "You've been in a medically induced coma for 3 weeks. The doctors said you shouldn't have survived the transport from the hospital, but you are stubborn." Clara took a sip, the water soothing her parched throat. Memories flooded back. The tray of champagne, the gun, the old woman, the bullets. "Your mother," Clara whispered. "Isabella, is she?" "She is in the garden, pruning her roses," Dominic said. He leaned against the heavy oak dresser, crossing his arms. "She comes to sit by your bed every day. She prays. It's annoying." Clara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. I'm glad she's okay." She looked around the opulent room. "I should go. My mum, she's back in Ohio. She'll be worried sick if I haven't called. And my rent? Your rent is paid," Dominic said flatly. "Your mother has been moved to a private facility in Cleveland with top-tier specialists for her condition. All expenses paid." Clara stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Consider it payment," Dominic said. "A life for a life. You saved my mother. I saved yours." "Thank you," Clara said, tears pricking her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. I'll leave as soon as I can stand. I won't be a burden." Dominic laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. He walked closer to the bed, looming over her. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Leave?" He tilted his head. "You don't understand the situation, Clara." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the silk sheets. Clara's trembling fingers picked it up. It was a document. A marriage certificate. Groom, Dominic Antonio Rossi. Bride, Clara Evans. Date, November 14th. The paper fell from her hands. This is a joke. The Costa family, the men who shot you, know you survived, Dominic said, his voice lowering to a dangerous growl. You are the only witness to the attempted assassination of Isabella Rossi. Victor Costa has a bounty on your head at $500,000. If you walk out that door, you will be dead within the hour. Clara's blood ran cold. So you're hiding me? I am protecting my investment, Dominic corrected her. By law and by the laws of the streets, a wife is untouchable. As long as you wear my name, Costa cannot touch you without declaring full-scale war. I didn't marry you for love, Clara. I married you to keep a witness alive. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and gunpowder. You are not a guest here, he whispered. You are a prisoner of your own survival. You don't leave this estate. You don't make phone calls without supervision. You belong to the Rossi family now. Clara stared at him, fear warring with anger. You can't just own people. Dominic's eyes flashed. I can, and I do, especially you. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. Rest up, wife. He sneered the word like a curse. You have a lot of explaining to do. I know who your father is. Clara stopped breathing. Dominic looked back over his shoulder, his eyes cold enough to freeze hell. We ran your DNA. Did you think you could hide it? Did you think you could save my mother and I wouldn't find out that you are the daughter of the man who ordered the hit? Clara tried to speak, but no words came out. Get well soon, Dominic said, opening the door. Because once you're healed, I'm going to find out whose side you're really on. And if I find out you were part of the plan, those 7 bullets will feel like a massage compared to what I do to you. The door slammed shut, leaving Clara alone in the silence of the golden room, trapped between a father who wanted her dead and a husband who wanted to destroy her. 2 weeks later, Clara was allowed to leave her room. She walked with a cane, her movements slow and stiff. The scar tissue across her torso pulled tight with every step, a constant reminder of the metal that had torn through her. But the physical pain was easier to manage than the psychological tension suffocating the Rossi estate. The house was a fortress. Armed guards stood at every corridor intersection. They nodded respectfully when she passed. Mrs. Rossi. But their eyes were watchful. She wasn't the lady of the house. She was the inmate. Clara! Isabella Rossi came bustling out of the drawing room. The matriarch looked fully recovered, her cheeks flushed with health. She embraced Clara carefully, mindful of her injuries. Look at you, Isabella beamed, cupping Clara's face. You are walking. I told Dominic to install an elevator for you, but he is stubborn as a mule. I'm fine, Isabella, Clara said softly. It was hard to be afraid of Dominic when his mother was so warm. It was jarring to reconcile that this sweet old woman was the queen of a criminal empire. Dinner is served, a butler announced stiffly. The dining room was a cavernous hall with a table long enough to seat 30. Tonight it was set for 3. Dominic sat at the head of the table. He didn't stand when Clara entered. He was reading a file, a glass of dark red wine near his hand. He looked up, his gaze sweeping over Clara's dress, a simple black silk slip dress that Isabella had bought for her. It hid the bandages, but it couldn't hide the frailty of her frame. Sit, Dominic commanded. Clara sat to his right, Isabella to his left. The tension was palpable. The clinking of silverware on china sounded like gunshots in the silence. The pasta is fresh, Isabella said, trying to break the ice. Chef Marco made it specially for you, Clara. He heard you like carbonara. It's delicious, thank you, Clara murmured, picking at her food. So, Dominic cut in, ignoring the food. He swirled his wine. Let's discuss the elephant in the room. Or should I say the wolf? Isabella sighed, putting down her fork. Dominic. Not tonight. Tonight is perfect, Dominic said, his eyes locking on to Clara. My men intercepted a package at the gate this morning, addressed to Mrs. Clara Rossi. Clara's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Dominic reached under the table and produced a small, velvet jewelry box. He slid it across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Clara. Open it, he dared her. Clara's hands shook as she reached for the box. She flipped the lid. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a bullet. A single silver bullet with a name engraved on the casing. Clara, and a note folded beneath it. Daddy misses you. Clara slammed the box shut, bile rising in her throat. She pushed it away as if it burned. He knows, Dominic said calmly. Victor Costa knows I married his bastard daughter. He thinks it's a power play. He thinks I kidnapped you to use as leverage. Dominic leaned forward, his voice dropping. Did you know he was your father before you took those bullets, Clara? Or was it a happy accident? Clara looked up, her blue eyes blazing with a sudden fire that surprised even Dominic. I knew, she said. Her voice didn't shake this time. Isabella gasped softly. Dominic's eyes narrowed. So you admit it. You're a spy. I'm not a spy, Clara snapped. She stood up, wincing as her stitches pulled. I'm a mistake. That's what he called me. My mother was a dancer at one of his clubs 20 years ago. When she got pregnant, he gave her 10 grand to get an abortion. She took the money and ran to Ohio instead. Clara gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. I grew up knowing exactly who Victor Costa was. I saw his face on the news. I knew he was a monster. When my mum got sick, I came to New York to find him. Not to join him. To beg. To beg? Dominic asked, skepticism dripping from his tone. To beg for money for her surgery, Clara said, tears spilling over. I went to his club. I told the guards who I was. Do you know what he did? He didn't even come out to see me. He sent a heavy to the back alley to beat me up. He told me if I ever said his name again, he'd kill my mother first, and then me. The room went silent. Dominic watched her, analyzing every micro-expression. He was a human lie detector, and for the first time he couldn't find a trace of deception. I got the job at the catering company under a fake name, Clara continued, her voice breaking. I was just trying to earn enough to leave the city. When I saw that man at the gala, when I saw the gun, I didn't save Isabella because of Mafia politics. I didn't know who you were. I just saw a man trying to kill an old woman who had been kind to me for 5 seconds. She looked at Dominic, her expression defiant. My father is a monster. I took 7 bullets to stop a murder. If that makes me a spy in your eyes, Dominic, then pull your gun and finish what he started, because I would rather die by your hand than live a single day being associated with Victor Costa. Clara turned and limped out of the dining room. Isabella wiped a tear from her eye. She looked at her son. She has the heart of a lion, Dominic, and you are treating her like a dog. Dominic stared at the empty doorway. He picked up the silver bullet from the box, rolling it between his fingers. She hates him, Dominic murmured, a realization dawning on him. Of course she hates him, Isabella snapped. She is a good girl. If she hates him, Dominic said, a cold, calculated smile slowly spreading across his face, then she is more than just a witness, Mother. She is a weapon. Dominic, Isabella warned, do not use that girl. We are at war, Mother. Dominic stood up, pocketing the bullet, and I just realized I have the ultimate trump card living in the guest wing. He walked toward the door, not to apologize, but to strategize. The waitress wasn't a liability anymore. She was the key to taking down the Costa Empire. But first, he had to make her stop hating him. He had to make her trust him. And for a man like Dominic Rossi, seduction was just another form of manipulation. The truce between Dominic and Clara didn't start with an apology. Men like Dominic Rossi didn't apologize. It started with a gun. 3 days after the disastrous dinner, Dominic found Clara in the estate's massive library. She was staring out the window at the high walls topped with razor wire, looking very much like the prisoner she felt she was. "Get changed," Dominic said from the doorway. He tossed a duffel bag onto the Persian rug. "Leggings, boots, something you can move in." Clara turned, eyes narrowing. "Where are we going? Another dinner where you can psychoanalyze my childhood?" "No," Dominic said, his face grim. "We are going to the basement. If Victor Costa wants you dead, I can put guards around you. I can lock you in a tower, but the only person who can truly guarantee your safety is you." Clara looked at the bag. She looked at him. "You want to teach me how to shoot?" "I want to teach you how to kill," Dominic corrected. "There is a difference." The underground firing range was cold, smelling of sulfur and concrete. Dominic stood behind her, his chest pressing against her back, his hands guiding hers as she held the heavy Glock 19. "Relax your shoulders," he murmured near her ear. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through her spine. "You're tense. If you fire like this, the recoil will snap your wrist." "I'm tense because I'm holding a lethal weapon," Clara snapped, though her heart was racing for a different reason. The heat of his body was overwhelming. For weeks, she had seen him as a monster. But standing here, enveloped by his strength, she felt a confusing, dangerous pull. "You are the weapon, Clara," Dominic said. "The gun is just a tool." He reached around, his large hand covering hers, adjusting her grip. His fingers were rough, warm, and sure. "Imagine the target is him. Victor, the man who threw you away." Clara stared at the paper silhouette at the end of the lane. She thought of the rain in the alleyway when Victor's men beat her. She thought of her mother, sick and alone in a hospital bed because Victor wouldn't spare a dime. "Focus on the anger," Dominic whispered. "Don't push it down. Use it. Let it pull the trigger." Bang! The shot went wide. Clara flinched. "Again," Dominic commanded. Bang! Clara spent the next 2 weeks in that basement. She learned to load, aim, and fire. She learned how to strip a weapon and put it back together, blindfolded. And with every lesson, the wall between her and Dominic began to chip away. One evening, after a grueling session, Clara lowered the gun, her arms shaking with exhaustion. She had put 3 rounds in the center of the target's chest. "Good," Dominic said. He handed her a towel. "Why are you doing this?" Clara asked, wiping sweat from her brow. "You said I was an investment. You don't train investments." Dominic leaned against the wall, studying her. The harsh range lighting cast deep shadows over his sharp features. "Investments are passive. Partners are active." Clara froze. "Partners?" Dominic stepped closer. The air charged with electricity. "You took 7 bullets for a woman you didn't know. You have loyalty in your blood, Clara. That is rare. Everyone in my world, my captains, my soldiers, they follow me because they fear me or because I pay them. You act on instinct." He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. It was the first time he had touched her affectionately. Clara forgot to breathe. "Victor Costa is a fool," Dominic whispered, his eyes dark and intense. "He threw away a queen to keep his pawns. I won't make that mistake." Clara looked up at him, her lips parting. "And what am I to you, Dominic? A queen? Or just a better pawn?" Dominic didn't answer with words. He leaned down and captured her mouth in a searing, bruising kiss. It tasted of danger and possession. Clara hesitated for a split second, then her hands wound into his hair, pulling him closer. It was a kiss that sealed a pact. He pulled back, breathless, his forehead resting against hers. "You are my wife," he rasped, "and tomorrow night we are going to introduce Mrs. Rossi to the city. Victor called for a peace summit. He wants to see you." Clara stiffened. "Don't worry," Dominic brushed his thumb over her lips. "He thinks he's going to intimidate a waitress. He has no idea he's about to meet the boss's wife." The summit was held at Le Ciel, a rooftop restaurant in Manhattan that was considered neutral ground for the 5 families. The entire floor was rented out. The windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Clara wore a dress of blood-red velvet, slit to the thigh, with diamonds dripping from her neck. Isabella's diamonds. She walked into the room on Dominic's arm, her head held high, masking the terror churning in her gut. Victor Costa sat at the center table. He was a bloated man, his face red from years of excess, surrounded by 4 bodyguards. When he saw Clara, his eyes widened, then narrowed into a sneer. "Well, well," Victor boomed, not standing up. "The prodigal bastard returns," and she cleaned up nice. Dominic pulled out a chair for Clara, then sat beside her. His demeanor was relaxed, but Clara knew his hand was resting near the gun inside his jacket. "Victor," Dominic nodded coolly, "you asked for a meeting. We are here." "I wanted to see if the rumors were true," Victor swirled his scotch. He looked at Clara with open contempt. "That Dominic Rossi was desperate enough to marry my trash." Clara's hands clenched into fists under the table. Dominic's hand covered hers instantly, squeezing tight. "Control," his touch said. "One man's trash is another man's treasure," Dominic said smoothly. "But we aren't here to discuss my marriage. We are here to discuss the territory lines in Brooklyn." "Forget Brooklyn." Victor slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're clever, Rossi? Parading her around? You think this humiliates me?" He pointed a sausage-like finger at Clara. "She is nothing. Her mother was a whore, and she is a waitress." Clara stood up. The room went silent. Even Dominic looked surprised. "My mother," Clara said, her voice steady and cold, "was a woman who loved you, and you destroyed her. And I may have been a waitress, Victor, but I bought my place at this table with blood. Something you wouldn't understand, since you hide behind your men." Victor's face turned purple. "You little bitch! Sit down, Victor," Dominic said, his voice dropping to that lethal growl. "You are speaking to my wife." Victor laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Your wife? Oh, Dominic. You really don't know, do you?" Victor leaned forward, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "You think she's a hero? You think she saved your mother by accident?" Dominic frowned. "Well, what are you talking about?" "I didn't order the hit on Isabella," Victor sneered. "I ordered the hit on her." He pointed at Clara. The world stopped. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" she whispered. "You came to my club," Victor spat. "You made a scene. You started asking questions about me. You were a liability. I sent that shooter to the gala to put a bullet in your head, Clara. You didn't jump in front of Isabella to save her. You were the target all along. The shooter just missed and pinned you both down." Victor looked at Dominic, triumphant. "She isn't a savior, Rossi. She's the reason your mother was almost killed. She brought the danger to your doorstep. You married the disease, not the cure." Silence stretched, tight as a piano wire. Clara turned to Dominic, horror in her eyes. I didn't know. Dominic, I swear, I didn't know." If this was true, then everything changed. She hadn't saved Isabella. Her presence had endangered her. Dominic's debt to her was a lie. Dominic stared at Victor, his face unreadable. Then he looked at Clara. She waited for the anger. She waited for him to push her away. Instead, Dominic stood up and buttoned his jacket. "You ordered a hit on a 20-year-old girl?" Dominic asked quietly. "She was a loose end," Victor defended himself. "She was your daughter," Dominic said. "She is nothing." "You're right about one thing, Victor," Dominic said, stepping around the table. "She brought the war to my doorstep, and for that I should thank you." Victor blinked. "What?" "Because it brought her to me." Dominic moved faster than thought. He grabbed a steak knife from the table and pinned Victor's hand to the mahogany wood. Victor screamed. His bodyguards reached for their weapons, but Enzo and the Rossi men were faster, their guns already drawn and leveled at the Costa heads. "You tried to kill my wife," Dominic roared, the mask of civility gone. "Twice, once at the gala, and you just tried to kill her spirit tonight," Dominic leaned into Victor's screaming face. "The peace treaty is cancelled. We take everything. Brooklyn, the ports, the clubs, everything." Dominic turned to Clara, offering his hand. "Come, Clara. The smell in here is making me sick." Clara took his hand, her legs trembling. They walked towards the elevator, leaving the screaming Don behind them. But as the elevator doors began to close, Victor shouted one last thing through his pain. "Ask him, Clara. Ask him about the file. Ask him what he knew before he married you." The doors shut, cutting off the sound. Clara looked at Dominic. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight. "Dominic?" she asked softly. "What file?" Dominic didn't look at her. "Not now, Clara." "What file?" she demanded, grabbing his arm. The elevator chimed as they reached the lobby. Dominic pulled his arm away gently. The file that proves I knew you were Victor's daughter before the gala," Dominic said, his voice hollow. "I was tracking you, Clara. I knew Costa sent a hitman for you. I let you go to that party because I knew it would draw the shooter out. I used you as bait to catch Costa's assassin." Clara stepped back, her back hitting the mirrored wall of the elevator. You knew the shooter was coming for me, and you let me work that night." "I had snipers in place. I thought I could take him out before he fired," Dominic said, turning to her, his eyes pleading for the first time. "I miscalculated. I didn't think he would get off 7 shots. I never meant for you to get hurt." "You used me," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Victor was right. You're just as bad as he is." "Clara, don't touch me." The elevator doors opened into the lobby, but they weren't greeted by the valet. They were greeted by the barrel of a machine gun. A black van screeched to a halt outside the glass doors. Men in ski masks poured out. It wasn't Costa's men. Costa was upstairs, bleeding. This was a third party. "Get down!" Dominic tackled Clara as the glass of the lobby exploded inward. The lobby of Le Ciel had transformed from a sanctuary of high society elegance into a slaughterhouse of glass and marble. The initial explosion of the entrance doors sent a shockwave that rattled the fillings in Clara's teeth. She was on the ground before she consciously realized what was happening, tackled by a heavy weight that smelled of sandalwood and expensive scotch. "Dominic! Stay down!" Dominic roared, his voice barely audible over the deafening chatter of automatic weapons. He dragged her behind the solid mahogany reception desk, just as the air above them filled with lead. Bullets chewed into the wood, sending splinters flying like angry hornets. The beautiful mirrored wall behind the concierge shattered, cascading down in a waterfall of jagged silver. Clara was curled into a ball, her hands clamped over her ears, her breath coming in short, terrified gasps. This wasn't like the gala. The gala had been sudden, shocking, and over in seconds. This was a siege. "Costa's backup," Dominic grunted, pulling his sidearm, a customized Beretta, and checking the magazine. His face was a mask of cold, focused violence, but there was a sheen of sweat on his brow that hadn't been there a moment ago. He knew he wasn't walking out of that meeting alive. He set a trap within a trap. If he died, his kill squad was ordered to scrub the building. Clara stared at him, her mind reeling. The adrenaline was pumping so hard her vision blurred, but the anger, the white-hot betrayal she had felt in the elevator, was still burning through the fear. "You knew!" she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. "You knew I was a target at the gala. You let me walk into that ballroom as a human shield." Dominic flinched. It wasn't from the gunfire suppressing them. It was from her words. He turned to return fire, popping up over the desk to squeeze off 3 controlled rounds before ducking back down as masonry exploded near his head. "We discuss this later," Dominic shouted back. "If we live that long," Clara yelled, "I will make sure you live." Dominic grabbed her shoulder. His grip was bruising, desperate. "I need you to listen to me, Clara. Enzo and the extraction team are 5 minutes out. The police are 10 minutes out. We are in the gap, the kill zone. We have to hold this position." "You mean you have to hold it?" Clara cried, looking at the gun in his hand. "I'm just a waitress." "No." Dominic's eyes locked onto hers. They were dark, intense, and for the first time since she had met him, filled with something that looked like regret. "You are not a waitress. You are a survivor. You took 7 bullets and lived. You walked into the lion's den tonight and spat in his face. You are Rossi." He winced, his hand going to his left side. When he pulled it away, his palm was slick with bright crimson blood. Clara gasped, "You're hit." "Ricochet," Dominic lied through gritted teeth, though the stain spreading across his white dress shirt suggested a direct impact. "Listen to me. They are flanking left, trying to get around the elevator bank. If they get that angle, we're dead. I can't cover both sides." He reached down to his ankle holster and pulled out a compact backup pistol. He shoved it into Clara's trembling hands. The metal was cold, heavy, and smelled of gun oil. I can't," Clara stammered. "Safety is off," Dominic ordered, his voice shifting into the command tone he used with his soldiers. "Point and squeeze. If you see anyone who isn't me or Enzo, you put them down. Do you understand?" "Dominic, do you understand?" he roared, shaking her slightly. "Yes," she whispered, gripping the weapon until her knuckles turned white. Dominic nodded, then turned back to the fray. He rose up, firing aggressively towards the main entrance, drawing the attackers' fire. The noise was unbearable, a cacophony of destruction. Clara pressed her back against the wood, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "He used me." The thought circled in her mind. He knew my father wanted me dead, and he used it to catch a hitman. It was unforgivable. It was monstrous. But then she looked at him. Dominic was fading. His movements were slowing down. The blood on his shirt was now a dark, spreading map of his mortality. He was firing with one hand, the other pressed tight against his wound. He was a monster, yes. But he was the monster, standing between her and the abyss. If he dies, I die, she told herself. But it was more than that. As she watched a bullet graze his shoulder, a surge of protective fury welled up in her chest. The same instinct that had made her jump in front of Isabella Rossi months ago. Nobody kills him but me. Clara shifted. She crawled to the edge of the desk, peering around the corner towards the elevators. The shadows moved. A figure clad in black tactical gear and a ski mask was creeping forward, silent amidst the chaos. He held a pump-action shotgun, raising it toward Dominic's exposed back. Dominic was too focused on the front doors. He didn't see the executioner flanking him. Time seemed to slow down. The world narrowed to a tunnel. Clara didn't think about her mother in Ohio. She didn't think about Victor Costa. She didn't think about the betrayal. She remembered the basement, the smell of sulfur, Dominic's chest against her back. Relax your shoulders. Focus on the anger. The gun is just a tool. Clara stood up. She didn't tremble. "Hey!" she screamed. The assassin turned, surprised to see the girl in the red dress standing tall amidst the ruin. Clara raised the pistol with two hands, locked her elbows, and exhaled. Bang! Bang! The recoil jolted her arms, shocking her system, but her aim was true. The first shot took the man in the throat. The second hit the center of his chest plate. He crumpled backward, the shotgun clattering uselessly to the marble floor. Dominic whipped around at the sound of the shots. He saw the dead man. He saw Clara, the gun still raised, smoke drifting from the barrel. For a split second, amidst the flying glass and death, Dominic Rossi looked at his wife with an expression of pure, terrified awe. "Good shot," he breathed. Before she could respond, tires screeched outside. Heavy doors slammed. A new wave of gunfire erupted, but this time it was disciplined, rhythmic. "Boss, clear the line!" Enzo's voice bellowed from the shattered entrance. The Rossi soldiers poured into the lobby like a black tide, cutting down the remaining Costa mercenaries with ruthless efficiency. Within 30 seconds, the room was silent, save for the groans of the dying and the settling of debris. Dominic slumped against the reception desk, the adrenaline finally abandoning him. He slid down to the floor, his face grey. Clara engaged the safety on the pistol, just as he had taught her, and placed it on the desk. She knelt beside him. Her dress was ruined, stained with dust and blood, but her hands were steady now. "Dominic," she said, pressing her hands over his wound. The blood was hot, pumping fast. "Did you get him?" Dominic asked, his voice a wet rasp. "I got him," she said. He managed a weak smirk. "My wife. The killer." "Save your breath," she snapped, though her voice cracked. "Enzo, get the car." The drive back to the Rossi estate was a blur of speed and silence. Enzo drove like a madman, weaving through traffic, while Clara held pressure on Dominic's side in the back seat. He slipped in and out of consciousness, his hand gripping her wrist so tight it threatened to cut off circulation. He was holding on to her like she was the only anchor, keeping him from drifting away. When they arrived, the estate's private medical team was waiting. They rushed Dominic into the sterilized trauma room set up in the east wing. Clara was left standing in the hallway, her hands covered in her husband's blood. Isabella Rossi appeared, her face pale but composed. She didn't ask what happened. She saw the blood, saw Clara's eyes, and simply pulled her into a hug. "He is strong," Isabella whispered. "He is Rossi. He will not leave us." "He lied to me, Isabella," Clara whispered into the older woman's shoulder, the tears finally coming. He knew everything." Isabella pulled back, framing Clara's face with her hands. "I know, child. He told me the night of the dinner, and I told him that secrets like that are poison. But Dominic, he has never known how to trust. He only knows how to control. Until you." 3 hours later, the house was quiet. The guards had doubled their perimeter. The war was officially over. Word had come from the street that Victor Costa had died of his injuries at the hospital, and his captains were scrambling to surrender to the Rossi organization. Clara walked into the master bedroom. Dominic was propped up against a mountain of pillows, an IV line running into his arm, fresh bandages wrapping his torso. He looked exhausted, stripped of his armor, but his eyes were alert as she entered. He watched her walk to the window. She stared out at the dark grounds, the golden cage she had once hated. "The doctor says it missed the liver," Dominic said, his voice rough. "I'll be walking in a week." "Good," Clara said, not turning around. "Clara, don't," she said, her voice sharp. She turned to face him. The firelight cast long shadows across the room. "Don't give me a speech, Dominic. Don't tell me it was for the greater good." "I won't," he said. He tried to sit up straighter, wincing visibly. "It wasn't for the greater good. It was for the win. You were a piece on the board. I used you. I risked your life to flush out a rat." "You admit it," she said, crossing her arms. "I admit it," Dominic said. "But that was before." "Before what?" "Before you woke up in that hospital bed and asked about my mother instead of yourself," Dominic said softly. "Before I watched you learn to shoot in the basement. Before I realized that I didn't want to win if you weren't standing there next to me." He gestured to the empty space on the bed beside him. "Come here." "I should leave," Clara said, her voice trembling. "I have money now. I could disappear. Go back to Ohio. Forget I ever met you." "You could," Dominic agreed. He looked down at his hands, hands that had ended lives, hands that controlled a city. "I wouldn't stop you. The contract. The marriage. I'd annul it. If you walk out that door, Clara, you are free. No debts, no Costa bounty. Just freedom." Clara stared at the door. It was unlocked. The guards would let her pass. She could go back to being Clara Evans, the waitress. She could be safe. But then she looked at the man in the bed, the man who had taken a bullet for her tonight, the man who had given her the power to kill the demons of her past. She realized with a jolt that Clara Evans, the waitress, didn't exist anymore. That girl had died the night of the Red Gala. The woman standing here was someone else, someone stronger, someone darker. She walked towards the bed, She didn't leave. She sat down on the edge of the mattress, careful of his injuries. Dominic let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. "I don't want to be safe," Clara whispered, her eyes searching his. "Safe is boring." Dominic reached out and took her hand. His thumb brushed over the heavy gold ring he had placed there weeks ago. "I can promise you everything, Clara," he said intensely. "Money, power, the world. But I will never promise you safety. Being with me, it's walking on a knife's edge every single day." "I know," Clara said. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "But I have good balance." Dominic closed his eyes, relief washing over his features. "I love you, Clara. I don't know how to do it right. I'm selfish. I'm dangerous. But I am yours." "I know you are," she murmured, brushing her lips against his, "because I'm the only one who can shoot as straight as you." 1 year later. The winter air in New York was crisp, biting, and smelled of snow. But inside the Pierre Hotel, the air was warm and scented with expensive perfume and ambition. The Rossi Winter Gala was the event of the season. Senators, judges, and celebrities mingled with men who killed for a living. The line between the law and the outlaw had never been blurrier, and Dominic Rossi stood at the center of it all. He stood on the grand staircase, a glass of champagne in his hand, looking down at the crowd. He looked different than he had a year ago. The hardness was still there, the lethal edge, but the cold isolation was gone. "Stop scowling at the district attorney, Dom. He's already agreed to the zoning permits." Clara stepped up beside him. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk that clung to her curves like liquid night, with a slit that revealed a flash of leg and a pair of stilettos sharp enough to kill. Around her neck sat the Rossi diamonds, heavy, ancient, and undeniable. She wasn't the terrified girl holding a tray of drinks anymore. She stood with her shoulders back, her chin tilted up, radiating a power that made men step aside and women whisper. "I wasn't scowling," Dominic said, slipping his arm around her waist and pulling her flush against him. "I was thinking." "Dangerous pastime for you," she teased, her fingers toying with the lapel of his tuxedo. "I was thinking about the last time we were here," Dominic said, his voice dropping lower, for her ears only. "The blood on the floor, the fear in your eyes." "I don't remember fear," Clara lied smoothly, her blue eyes sparking with mischief. "I remember saving your mother's life. And yours. Basically, this whole empire exists because of me," Dominic laughed, a genuine, rich sound that turned heads in the ballroom. "You're not wrong, Mrs. Rossi. You're the best investment I ever made." "Partner?" she corrected him, tapping a manicured nail against his chest. "Active partner." "Queen," he amended, kissing her temple. From the corner of the room, Enzo watched them. He saw the way the room gravitated toward them. The Costa family was a memory, dust in the wind. The other families had fallen in line. Dominic and Clara Rossi weren't just running the city. They were the city. Clara looked out at the sea of faces, people who feared her, respected her, and envied her. She thought about the 7 scars on her torso, the map of her survival. She thought about the gun in her purse, a permanent accessory. She had walked through fire to get here. She had married the devil, wrestled him for his soul, and won. "Are you ready?" Dominic asked, offering her his arm to descend the stairs. Clara smiled, a smile that was equal parts beauty and blade. "I was born ready, Dominic." They descended the stairs together, the king and his queen, walking into a future that was dangerous, uncertain, and absolutely theirs. And that is how a waitress became a queen. Clara didn't just survive the Mafia, she conquered it. Dominic might have been the boss, but in the end, she was the one holding the gun that saved them both. It's a twisted kind of love story, built on bullets, betrayal, and blood. But in their world, maybe that's the only kind of love that survives. What do you think? If you found out your partner used you as bait like Dominic did, could you ever forgive them? Or would you have left him to the wolves in that lobby? Let me know in the comments below. I seriously want to read your take on this. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And hit subscribe with the notification bell turned on so you'll never miss the next part of the drama. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.